Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Reading Room. I'm Mark Reid. I'll be your host. And today I haven't done an interview for ages actually, but I did get a recommendation from a friend by the name of Robin who suggested that I talk to Daniel. And Daniel, I sort of rocked up on your channel and proceeded to have an argument with a Christian who I've met before, Jill, who is inexperienced, let's put it that way. But we sort of agreed that we would have a talk, and really I was sort of saying, are you up for debates and things like that, but we sort of went, well, we'll have a discussion first. So really this is that discussion. Daniel, why don't you introduce yourself and sort of what you do and where you're coming from?
Hey, thanks, Mark. It's lovely to be on your channel and talking to your audience. My background is I'm an engineer, and then it so happened that I, s- s- I happened to face off atheists in Australia when I came here.
Hmm.
I've met atheists before in the States. They were much more polite and they were much more aware of Christian doctrines, I suppose. But atheists out here in Australia probably didn't have a clue about religion, and their disassociation from religion is out of spite and hate. That's my first experience because I got a lot of swear words from them towards God when I came here, and was a shocker. And some of the atheists during Christmas were having a nice time, but swearing at Christ, to my shocker. And
Okay.
that's my experience of interacting with atheists in my first years in Adelaide. And
Mhm.
for the good of it, it really took off from there, and I developed some warm friendships with atheists. And in fact, they ended up hosting my first book launch, which I basically wrote as an outcome of those discussions, years worth of discussions, I suppose, and reading several books that were offered to me to read by my best friend, who's an atheist, Peter Morris. So I also have written a song about this on my channel. If you hop onto my channel music section, you'll get to read my story here in Adelaide. So
Nice.
thereafter, I ended up writing two more books. So the first book is titled as Ancient Astronomy, Allah's Narrative, where I'm discussing the vastness of the cosmos and the origins of planetary skies. The second book is titled Origins of Planet Earth and Creation of Planet Earth and Origins of Life, where I'm discussing evolution at some good detail as a response to one of the books that I read from Jerry A. Cohen's Why Evolution is True. And I'm also discussing the creation of the planetary Earth itself in that particular book. And the third book, which had to be my first book, to be honest, from how our discussions really unraveled, which eventually became my third book, is titled as Sharia for Australians. Might come as a shocker for you guys, but just you know, take it easy. So that's those are my three books available on Amazon for you guys to access. And apart from that, I've translated the Quran in modern English. After my three books, I felt a need. There was a need to render the Quran in modern English. So I've done that, and I'm still doing commentary. While I'm doing this, in the last year, I've opened my channel. It's called Prophet Daniel Has Spoken. That's my handle on YouTube. So you're most welcome to cruise in, browse the contents that I produce. I mostly interact with Christians these days, but any welcome invitation from atheists is where my expertise is, niche is. So I love it. So lovely to be here, Mark.
Oh, thank you. That's awesome. So I think I linked you in the, did I link you in the description? I thought I linked you somewhere. I hope I linked you somewhere. So I'll definitely put the link in if I haven't. Oh yeah,
Okay,
I haven't. Okay, so that's my bad. Just one second, and I'll fix that. I do apologize. I did
no
mean to
problem.
do that before I started, but I'll definitely have it in the description and in the title as I usually do. But those are some interesting topics, and we can definitely cover a lot. Just out of interest, first off, what kind of engineer are you?
Mechanical aerospace.
Aha, mechanical aerospace engineer. Yep. I have noticed a tendency for mechanical engineers to go outside of their field. which is fine, for just a casual chat. But you've got some topics where you're really pushing back against some of the more complex aspects of science in here, and we can
Yeah,
definitely discuss them. But what I want to like sort of talk about at the moment is the attitude of Australians towards religion.
right.
Um, Australia has a very standoffish relationship with religion. Sort of, if you come and like sort of proselytize, people will get very, very upset about it. It's just sort of like I remember a video of a Christian evangelical on the train, doing his evangelical thing, and people were so mad, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, is that the experience that you've had as well?
No, not at all. I mean, I didn't go out evangelizing at city centers or trains or buses
Right.
or anything of that nature. When I came here
Mhm.
in the first month, I was Googling to like socialize. That's my initial days in Australia.
Mhm.
So when I was Googling, I stumbled upon a group on Meetup. So that was called as Sunday Assembly. What in fact they were doing was they were encouraging people from Sunday church to walk into Sunday Assembly and uh, deconstruct their faith. So that
Right.
they were actually proselytizing. All right.
Right,
So,
right, right.
so I got in touch with them, and I happened to go to Sunday Assembly one Sunday and met up with these people, Bartholomew, and who introduced me to Peter and Peter Morris. We had a brief discussion there. I wanted to know why he disbelieved or disbelieves in
Right.
God. So
Yeah.
he shocked me with his response. Nobody had responded to me before in that manner. Usually, people's response would be like, "Oh, come on, we don't see God. God is not visible. He won't talk to us," and blah blah blah. But what he said to me shook me deeply, and I thought I owe him an answer. So he said to me, "Look, anything that can convince me would be considered good enough evidence."
Right.
So that was a shocker, and that was like, wow. And instantly, I had a commitment to share uh, my conviction and the reasons why I believe with him, right? So it took a journey before I could articulate him these things. It was not easy because I was in the States, obviously, and the kind of English that people spoke here, there is some difference. I can't really explain the difference, but there is some difference, and it took a while to sort of even I wasn't good in writing. I mean, because English is not my language. You see, I come from a
Yeah,
different
yeah.
language, and I had not envisioned that I would be an author one day. Never. I mean, I never
Mm.
thought of writing, let alone in English, in my language. I never thought of writing anything at all. But it so happened that I had to write emails because most of the communication that we were making was on emails and messages. So when I was writing to him, he sort of gave me a feedback that, okay, you have to write better. Maybe I didn't understand you. Then I realized how poor was my writing in English, and he couldn't really understand me. And he was sharp, like when he was writing back to me. So it took a journey of like 3 years writing back and forth before I wrote my first book. And my first book was read by a fellow Australian, my neighbor, and in a couple of weeks he came back to my door and knocked my door and said, "Hey mate, I believe in this. I believe in this." He said to me, and I was like, "Wow, shocked." And I asked him, Did you really understand everything?" And he said, "Oh, look, I'm into books. I read lots of books, and people do make mistakes, lots of mistakes in their writings, but it's okay. I understood what you wanted to say." So basically, that gave me confidence. And right now, to be honest with you, I'm improving this book. The first book that I've written, I'm improving the language thereof. Hopefully,
Okay.
it'll come out in a better language than it was first written. So, yeah.
So you said that Australians were going around proselyte, like, so basically atheists were going into churches. I've never seen that
No, they
happen
didn't
in
go
my
into the
entire life.
church. Sorry, perhaps you didn't understand me. They
Okay.
were having a assembly of their own called Sunday Assembly, and they would meet up at a place,
Sure.
and they would advertise to people to
Hmm.
impress them to come and attend Sunday assemblies instead of Sunday churches.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
I've definitely heard of that happening, but that's not really proselytizing. Is going out and telling people, preaching at them without their being there, going into their spaces, basically. So, there isn't. I guess with atheism, there's definitely a problem where you have religions which automatically have a social circle and a community group, and atheists generally not so much, like where we sort of have to build those ourselves. So I don't see why any one religion has a monopoly on sort of having a community that gathers on a certain day to just enjoy each other's company. I don't see the problem with that. I think that if religion can do it, there's no reason atheists shouldn't be able to do it either.
Absolutely. I'm in favor of it. In fact, everybody should do it. Like
Mm.
everybody, especially faith, it's not something that you preserve in the fortress of your hearts and minds. You should put it out on the table, spit it out on the table, and see if it stands the criticism and the test of time. If it doesn't, then these are the beliefs that are not good enough to be comported into the future. It's very simple. So I do appreciate what the atheists were doing. That gave me the opportunity to interact with them in a you know debating format, really explosive debates. And I mean, the way that we developed our friendship, it's not out of pleasing each other. It's not out of buttering each other. It's out of raw battles and fights and disagreements. That's how we forged a friendship. So it's it was nothing personal. I think there was this real legitimate inquiry that I had and Peter Morris had, and that's how we became friends. It was not against each other. It was not It was not personal against each other's faith or anything like that. It was this genuine inquiry that Peter had, and I sort of perceived it that he had a genuine inquiry, and that
Well,
sort of forged our friendship.
you mentioned faith, and I'm going to have to get you to define that because I've heard it defined as all kinds of different things. To me, faith is sort of I usually take the biblical sort of interpretation of what it is, but you might mean something different. So, what do you actually mean by faith?
What I mean by faith is fulfillment of a promise. So it's futuristic to me. Like I could have faith in
Fulfillment
you,
of a
for example.
promise,
I know you as Mark Reid, and you're a fantastic person. But whether I have faith in you depends on how much I believe in you, for example. So if I believed in you, I would have faith in your promises. I would have faith in you that you would do things in the future based off of
right?
the character that you are made of, or things like that. So faith to me is futuristic. It's pretty fluid. If you say, for example, I believe in Mark Reid, but I may not have so much of the faith because Mark Reid doesn't really keep his word. And if Mark Reid breaks up his words, then I might drop my faith in Mark Reid, for example, right? So same as God, if God does not keep up His promises, then I might not have faith in God as well, for example. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I don't have a problem, like, taking your definition. I don't have a problem with it being fulfillment of a promise at some point in the future. So
Yeah.
you have faith, or I would just use the word confidence. I would have a confidence based upon like you said, if I keep breaking my word, I would not have confidence in that person if they keep breaking their word, if they keep saying they'll do things and don't, kind of thing. But really, what I'm looking at is sort of, would you like? And you mentioned it before that atheists are for evidence, because my confidence in somebody or something is based upon the evidence that I have that it is actually reliable. So if you're using faith like that, if I didn't have the evidence that something is there, then I wouldn't have that faith in it. So um really what I'm asking is, why do you think that you should have faith in a god?
Yeah. Just before that, I answer this particular inquiry of yours, you brought up a very interesting point. That's confidence, and that's how when I read the Quran, it does talk about that concept. It talks about yaqeen, which is confidence. All right. So let me go back to the question now and answer that for you. Why do you have faith in God? is what your question is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when I talk about faith in God, there is a presupposition that I already believe in God. Okay.
Why is
Now,
that necessary?
because that's how I define faith. Because for me, faith is faith sort of assumes a position of being aware of something, being knowing something, and only then comes faith.
Well, you defined faith differently before. You said it was the expectation of a fulfillment of a promise.
Absolutely, you have those
Yeah.
expectations only when you know of somebody. You have expectations. If you don't know of somebody, there's no point in having expectations from entities that don't really exist. So I basically define faith from the standpoint of the assumption that that entity already exists.
Well,
Or I Yeah.
sure. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that's something that I would do. For instance, if sort of a Nigerian prince that like
Yeah.
sends something to me, I wouldn't assume that somebody exists just because I get an email from somebody, for instance. Like you just in today's world, you can't assume that somebody is actually real when they post something, like it so the thing about a presupposition is it's kind of ungrounded, right? So a presupposition and presuppositional positions really are that you are taking it as a given kind of thing. So
I think we are getting entangled in words and semantics. Let me answer your question from the point of view that why do I believe that God exists, rather
sure,
than bringing in faith into the
okay,
argument.
sure,
Okay.
sure.
Yeah. So why do I believe God exists? Okay. Now, the okay. Now let me discuss this before. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this particular scientific paper by um, Justin L. Barrett. So there was this research conducted among children as young as 3 years and 4 years old, and the outcomes of those researches were um, they found human beings have had the tendency to relate to an agency, um, having not been taught or brainwashed as young as 3 years old, 3 year olds, 4 year
Sure.
olds. You're aware of this paper?
I'm not aware
Conceptual.
of the paper, but I would agree that humans generally tend to give agency even
Yeah.
where none exists. I would agree with that.
Okay. So according to this paper, the conclusions are this: that humans are natural believers. Not just humans. Outside of this paper, we also have evidence of um, chimpanzees showing this behavior. There
Hmm.
was this famous chimp that was tutored to use human language, sign language. And the chimp, I think, the nickname was chimp was Coco. The chimp was a female, and in many interactions with this chimp, what we found out was the chimp did talk about death, and after death, the chimp talked about going to a better place. So the agency tendency is not limited to human evolution, even if you want to talk about the subject from the evolution standpoint. So it's also found in animals, particularly primates, where we have the example thereof with this chimp called Coco, right? So this is very natural to people. And
Hmm.
now atheism or godlessness or absence of this agency need to be taught to the creatures, to people of intelligence, need to be taught. Now, if this is how we are, which I think evolution biologists argue, stating a series of false positives ushered in these triads in our neurons, and that's how we come to relate to this agency based off of the false positives in our human evolution. But just the example of the cocoa sort of points out that it's not only in relation to human evolution, but also animals have this. So what
Sure.
is proven is creatures have this tendency to relate to this agency, and this makes it a default position that creatures have towards the agency of a creator. So this default position is what I call as knowing. So we kind of know from birth that we have a creator. It's known innately. So therefore, nobody needs to be taught. Even little children need not be taught that God knows what is in the box, what is in that closed box. God knows it. So children automatically assume that God knows what is in the box. So this kind of knowledge of who God could be or who God is already known to us. Okay, so this is what I call as knowing. Now, from for me to move on from this uh, default position towards rejecting the idea of knowing this entity would take evidence. So I would consider it is necessary for me to point at evidence that this innate assumption or innate knowing or familiarity that humans have of an agency is false. So to point out that it's false, we need to show evidence. We need to bring forward evidence to show it's false. And one of those things could be this: the evolutionary biologists can point out the exact set of genes in the DNA which are responsible to usher in this triad. And once you gene edit it, for example, then that creature, that being that results, should not demonstrate to you the triads of relating to an agency. And that would be the evidence to work with, where we can sort of come to the conclusion that evolution did impart the agency relationship in the creatures. All right. So that would be the kind of the quality of evidence that I would be looking forward to. Once found, then I would question the belief in this agency. Up until
Okay.
then, yeah, up until then,
Yeah,
I don't
no.
feel, yeah.
Look, Daniel, you're absolutely shifting the burden of proof. So, um, really, when you're sitting there saying it's the default position, it's not the default position. No child is born with a knowledge of God. It has to be taught to them. There is a tendency to anthropomorphize things as a human, right? Like all kinds of humans will also believe that there's monsters in the closet or monsters in the night. There's some kind of spirit things that flying around. It seems to be that lacking any kind of explanation for things, we put something on it. We appeal to something. That doesn't make it the default position. Because when you look at when people are making claims, the default position is always the null hypothesis. It's always the it does not exist until it can be shown to exist. Because if we did it the other way, I could basically say, hey, all kinds of children, as well as apes, believe there's monsters or some kind of evil things lurking in the darkness. You've got to prove me wrong, which is a shifting of the burden of proof. If I'm making a positive claim that something exists in the darkness because people have a tendency to do that, then you've got to show me that they don't exist, which is an impossible feat. If I say, hey, these monsters, they could be immaterial, they could be invisible, they could be all of these things. You've got to then go out and prove that they don't exist, which is an almost impossible feat. So when you're talking about scientific studies, what I doubt his conclusion is that God is the default position. I think you're adding that on to the end of it. I think that you're saying, well, he's found that humans have a tendency to anthropomorphize natural events and ascribe it to some sort of being rather than just natural events. And I'd love the name of the paper. If you do have a citation, I would absolutely love to read that. But I doubt that he's sort of saying that.
I'll just
Um,
share here the document that I have. If you can pull that
okay,
up on the screen here, please. So right there, let me just expand this a little bit.
it's in a Word document.
Yeah,
Do you have a link to the actual paper? Because
I'll,
it
I'll
just says View Scientist article. I don't have a name for the paper at all.
Yeah, I mean, this is the article that got shared with me by my friend who's an atheist here, right? So I will send you the
The
link. This
I'm
is this
sorry,
is in the Google
that
Drive.
God shared with you?
No, my friend, atheist friend.
Oh, okay. Well, what's the name
Okay.
of the article?
So basically, it's New Scientist article by Justin L. Barrett. I mean, this
Um,
article. I mean, this article got shared to me by my atheist friend, and
okay,
I can show you a link. Go ahead.
so the problem is that
Yeah.
articles are not papers. Okay, do you understand the difference
I
between them?
I get your point. I get your point. I think.
Well, you said it was a paper, so is it a paper or is it an article?
Oh well, I have to maybe step back here because of this inquiry. I'm not particularly sure it was if it was a paper published in some scientific
Journal.
area or field. Well, this is what I got from my atheist friend. Okay, I can have a look, I can have a check on it, but I'm not particularly sure at this point in time.
Yeah. So,
So
Daniel, the problem that I have right now is you started
yeah,
off by saying, and I wrote it down, that there's a scientific paper that you had that sort of suggested that we have an innate religious belief. And now you're sort of going back to, well, it's an article that someone has written. So the problem I have is that articles are not peer reviewed. They're not checked for any kind of correctness on them. So don't get me wrong. It is something I really would like to read, but they don't carry as much weight as an actual
I
scientific
absolutely understand
paper.
your point, um, Mark. I absolutely understand your point. I'm sorry that I should have done this work beforehand
No, no, it's
to
fine.
see if
It's
it was
fine.
a proper article published in a scientific paper, in a scientific sort of field and stuff like that. I should have done these checks. I'm sorry. I gotta apologize that I haven't really done it. I just took off of the link that I had
Okay.
shared
Well,
with me
it's
by
not a
my atheist
problem. It's not a problem. I just want to be really clear on what we're
Sure.
looking at
I
here.
absolutely understand your point of view. Yeah, your
Yeah.
criticisms are valid. Yeah,
Yeah, this is
yeah,
paywalled as well, so it's kind of yeah. I mean, I don't disagree that humans have a tendency to veer towards, sort of ascribing agency to places where there is no agency. For instance, if you hear a noise basically in your house, generally like it's a really unweird noise that's kind of a bit loud. Your mind will jump to, oh, there's someone in my house, rather than oh, it's just a noise of something falling or something natural kind of thing. Like that is the way the mind works. And there's a reason for that evolutionary. Like when you say evolution, it works under evolution. It doesn't, because evolution says that the animals that survived are the ones that did give some kind of agency to things they've heard or events that happened, because the ones that didn't, generally it's the rustle of bushes, right? Have you heard that?
of course. Yeah, I get it.
Right.
Yeah,
So the ones that survived were the ones that heard the rustle of bushes and thought tiger rather than nothing at all.
gotcha. No, my objections to that is this:
Hmm.
this agency you know that's come out of this particular research shown in this article here is not the outcomes of apprehensions. These are these experiments were conducted in safe environments where there was no sense of fear or sense of danger or anything like that. So these were conducted on young children in a safe environment, 3-year old, 4-year old. So you can imagine they are not really analogous to situations where human evolution was taking place due to the in the wild, and people had all sorts of fear and apprehensions to safeguard their life. Right? That's not the exact situation here. We are experimenting with little children, 3-year old, 4-year olds, and they are pointing at this agency and making assumptions or assuming that God knows what is in the box, kind of thing. So that's a different aspect of relating to an agency, not necessarily stemming out of fear or apprehensions. Are you able to like differentiate the two?
Well, I'm just reading on the screen here that that's not actually saying what you're claiming it's saying. His contention is that the various features of developing minds and attraction to agent-based explanations, a tendency to explain the natural world in terms of design and purpose, and an assumption that others have superpowers, makes children naturally receptive to the idea there may be one or more God, which helps to account for the world around them. Being receptive to an idea and having innately an idea, like when you're born, those are two very different things. So what he seems to be saying is that there is a tendency for young minds to ascribe agency, and especially agency beyond their ability to understand, which makes them receptive to the idea of a god. That does not mean that the god is inbuilt, right? So what it's saying is that, hey, the way that our minds work, it is a, a natural path to get to a god, but that doesn't mean that you actually have it innately.
I understand that. So this is the starting point, I should say. It's what I would argue is like this. So this is the framework with which human beings are operating. We are open to the
Hmm.
idea, or we possess the tendency to relate to this agency. Okay, that's the
Sure.
starting point.
Yes.
Now, moving forward, what is the evidence? Do we have a confirmatory evidence thereafter? That becomes the question, important question to ask. And I would say, yes, there is confirmatory evidence. And what that is, and what that differentiates from, say, one could argue, oh, I could say there is a fairy in my garage. How would you disbelieve, right? So what is the negation? Why do you even shift the burden of proof? So I would say, look, it's not as simple as that, especially when you have communication made by this agency. So once humans have received communication from this agency, the position is solidified and confirmed that this agency exists. And what is the communication? God has always communicated to human beings, and much of that communication is documented in what we find today as the accounts of the Bible and the account of the Quran. And this is the communication of God. And what do we do with this communication? Okay, now this is what God says. If
Well, just
humans
before we
doubt,
move on, Daniel, I do apologize. Just before we move on, I just want to make the point that um, we, just because we have a tendency to think in a, would you agree that just because we have a tendency to think in a certain way as children doesn't mean that that is the best way to think?
but when we grow up, the tendency is not disappearing, does it? It doesn't disappear. It becomes robust, and people sort of validate those tendencies with
Well, sure,
reasoning
it
ability.
does.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it does. Like basically, what we find is that a much more valid, a much more effective way to think is critical thinking.
yeah.
Right. So instead of going, oh, it's dark there, someone's hiding in there to get me, or that noise must have been a burglar, it's better to think critically and say, is there any actual evidence that my instinctual reaction is actually correct?
Absolutely, there is a need for
Right.
that, and humans do that all the time. And the point that I would like to re-emphasize is this: as human beings, we are not acting from the premise of fear any longer. We are not in the wild. We are not in the amid the bushes where
I would
we are being hunted
disagree.
by tigers and lions. We are
I would
not in
absolutely
that
disagree.
unsafe environment. We are in safe environment. People are in the universities where they are critically thinking. They are, in safe spaces where they philosophers, come up with these theories and dark, uh, evolution or evolving evolution of ideas and emergent thoughts. All of this is taking place in safe spaces. So human beings are not operating from the standpoint of danger.
I would absolutely disagree. I think
Why
that
would you
people,
disagree?
well, people still are making decisions based upon fear-based thing. They may fear the other, fear, sort of a lot of things play into that. We still have the fear of missing out, right? Like the advertising preys on your fear of missing that thing that you think you need for your life, right? So you still have fears that these type of people are going to ruin society. Those fears are different than originally, what we sort of had to manage while we were out in the wilds, sure, but those fears still exist, especially through tribalism and the fear of the other, the fear of the people that are different. We still have these fears come up all the time. People have fears of hell. And I don't know what you believe, but I don't see any reason to fear that. It's just not a fear for me. So I disagree that these fears aren't still playing on people's minds.
Well, let's agree to disagree here, because I don't
Okay.
really necessarily agree that fear is an operating force. 'Cause especially myself, um, I have lost my communities. I a- and it's for critical thinking. I have taken um, the the pathway of critical thinking to the loss of my community, and that doesn't, not being with my community is not something that is big enough for me to trade off critical thinking. Do you understand my point? So I'm no more part of the mosques or a Muslim community, which I was all my life. But
Okay.
I'm no longer, because of the critical thinking pathway that I've chosen. So
That's
I'm not.
odd. I
Sorry.
mean, that's kind of odd because sort of, I mean, critical thinking is a function of rationality,
Yeah.
and if I don't know why you would want to not be rational. Like, I get people have disagreements. Like, I think that you can absolutely be a Muslim and be rational and use critical thinking. Like, I may disagree with the line of thought, but I don't know who would sort of say, well, I'd rather not use critical thinking.
Well, the traditional religions mostly rely on their traditions, basically.
Hmm.
So cultural Christians would rely on their traditions, the patristic traditions, and cultural Muslims would do the same. They would rely on um, their traditions dating back to medieval times, and they would consider some of the elders, or the forefathers, or the church fathers, or the sheikhs in the Islamic tradition, as
Yeah.
people or teachings against which you cannot really think of criticizing them or going against them, or things like that. To fight this battle, it's not an easy battle to fight. It's a hard battle, and when you fight these sort of things, you basically get excommunicated. Okay, so this is what I'm talking. And mostly people, whether atheists or believers, they are followers. Mostly people are followers. Not majority of the people are not critical thinkers. This is just the ground level facts that we have to deal with. I mean, not
Uh,
everybody out there is a critical thinker. Would you agree with me?
I think that there's sort of flaws in people's critical thinking. I would agree with that. But my
Yeah.
experience of the atheist community is that, yeah, basically everybody's doing critical thinking. Like,
That
there
would
there
be a
is.
that would be an assumption on your
Well,
side.
and I'll explain why. It's
Yeah.
because of skepticism, right?
Mhm.
So, the whole skeptic movement is based around moderate your confidence in accord with the evidence that you have found. So basically, it lends itself to critical thinking because the central tenet is a critical evaluation of evidence versus what you actually believe. Are you familiar with epistemology?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is epistemology. Is
And
skepticism.
how many of the atheists do you reckon are engaging with it? There are
Um,
teenagers who are atheists. There are just adults, new adults who are
sure.
atheists. And how many of those do you reckon are engaging with this epistemic studies?
Like, of the atheists I know, or atheists in general?
Atheists in general. There's only few atheists who would be doing
I
this.
mean, well, yeah. I mean, but the thing is that atheism isn't the same as a religious worldview. I would say probably 60%. around the world. I think that if you limit it to the skeptic community, it would be a very high, probably about 80% or so are using critical thinking.
When I went to this Sunday assembly, it was filled up with atheists, maybe around
Okay.
50 of them. And how many do you reckon engaged with me?
What do you
Two.
mean?
Two of these people only engaged with me,
Okay.
and
But
majority of
does
them
that
weren't really interested to engage. You know what I mean? So majority of the people are just followers. That's my sort of conclusion that I'm drawing. Whether it is of atheists or of believers, it's the
hold
same
it,
across the
Daniel,
board.
if
Yeah.
you didn't engage with them, how do you know that they weren't using critical thinking in their lives?
The I mean, look, if people are using critical thinking, there would be greater engagement. That's
No.
how I would word it. If
No.
people aren't making engagement, the only conclusion that I can draw out of it is they are not critically thinking. And this applies to everybody, though. It applies to people of religion. It applies to people who are non-religious or atheists.
No, no. So if you go to a atheist meetup where it is like, hey, we're going to be a community, a lot of people will just go, yeah, I don't want to talk about religion. If you go to some place that's like, hey, let's discuss religion, you'll probably find a lot greater engagement. But in Australia, there's a lot of atheists and agnostics and whatever label you want to put on them, nuns basically, that don't even care for it. They really just do their lives and they basically don't want to talk about it at all.
Yeah,
And that's okay. But
I mean,
I would
there is
hesitate
nothing
to
wrong with it.
say, well, I would hesitate to say, well, they didn't engage with me about what I wanted to talk about, so therefore they're not using critical thinking. I think that you have to evaluate what they're actually saying once, you can't just make that declarative statement if you haven't actually engaged with them.
Well, I would again disagree with you because if people have moved away from their um, natural tendency towards believing in an agency, well, they have made a decision to move away from it. It had to be based on some form of convincing that they have um, undergone or gone through or experienced some form of
No,
convincing. Wait a second, please let me finish. Some form of convincing that this belief, this innate belief that they held before, is false because of this reason. There has to be some form of convincing that has occurred in their life, okay, whatever it is. And if a people have gone through this process and disbelieved and have become atheists, then what is stopping them from sharing that? And if they are hesitant or against sharing these experiences of their own, then what does it mean? It only means that they are not critically thinking. Okay, that's the conclusion that I draw.
I disagree with that. I disagree. I think that some people just do not want to go through a conversation because they don't really care if you join them or not. Unlike a religion, there's nothing in atheism saying you've got to get people on side. You've got to convince people. You've got to go out there and recruit for our church or, draw people towards some kind of, Allah or Muhammad, or you've got to spread the word of this. There's no obligation to. So an atheist, and quite frankly, look, Daniel, an atheist is just someone that doesn't believe in God. So you've said there's a natural sort of tendency for humans to lead towards agency, and I would agree with that. Whether or not that is a correct belief is another story completely, because I know this because I was raised in a secular household and I didn't even know, I didn't have a concept of what God was until I was sort of 7, 8 years old. I had no idea what it was about. And I was raised in a household that sort of, my mum believed in astrology and things like that. So that's the kind of thing that I was drawn towards. So following your own logic, you've also got to say, well, it's also spiritualism. Because at that point, I was still an atheist, right? Because you could believe in aliens, Bigfoot, astrology, spirits, devils or demons, right? You could believe that as long as there is no God involved, you're still an atheist. So the sort of innate thing that you're talking about to believe in agency, number one, it's explained as a flawed belief, and that's how a lot of some of our beliefs are, like superstitions, for instance. We believe that wearing your underpants inside out is going to be good for the game because it's a superstition. They're flawed beliefs, and sort of nothing
Again,
that you've said
again,
leads
there
me
is
to believe that an innate tendency towards agency is going to get an accurate belief, while there's a lot of evidence that critical thinking does get you to accurate beliefs.
again you're not separating the two. I mean, there is this spectrum where people are prone to believe in an agency, and that can be demons, that can be God, that can be superstition, that can be whatever, right?
Sure.
There is this spectrum, but in that spectrum there is something that you can separate, which is belief in a creator who organizes the systems of the natural world and the rest. So there is this, there is a need to distinguish or to discern between an agency that's invoked as a creator of the cosmos or of the universe and the rest. So you seem not to be making this uh, separation.
Correct.
You seem to be pulling up all of these things together, which I believe
Hmm.
it's inappropriate. Or
Why?
um, the reason being, we have this philosophical question that resonates to us, to educated class of human society: who is the creator of the universe? So
No, that is
this
not the
inquiry,
question.
this
That is not the
inquiry is
question.
completely
It's
different from superstition.
No, no, it's that's not the question. The question is what's the origin of the universe? Saying that it's a like creator, that it has agency, is already presupposing
I get your
that that
point.
natural tendency is in fact correct. And this is why deconstruction is so
No,
important
I get your
because
point.
yeah,
I get
yeah,
your
yeah.
point. The
So
point being,
what's the
Mark,
origin of the
however,
universe
what is the
is the
origins of this
question.
universe?
Right, right.
In
But
asking
what
this
I'm saying,
question,
Daniel,
yeah,
just 1 second. In your
sure.
own paper, the guy says there's a tendency to ascribe agency to the world around us, but largely what is actually believed is dependent on culture. It seems like that feeling for agency is filled by whatever you're taught when you're younger. So in his own paper, he's saying that. But that
Absolutely.
doesn't make the tendency for humans to um, believe in agency um, as a accurate belief any more than the tendency to think that the person unfamiliar to you, is going to harm you, because we have a tendency to do that as well, is actually correct as well. Right? One thing is independent of the other.
Let me ask you this, Mark. This
Yeah.
certainty in your mind as a rational thinker that a demon would hurt your neighbor, in comparison to, in comparison to their, the idea that there is a creator might be plausible. Okay, these two questions, there is a, these are the opposite side of the spectrums. Would you agree with me? I mean, you would believe, you would absolutely rubbish the assertion or the thought that a demon could harm your neighbor, but you would not be able to rubbish the exact, with the exact same intensity, the thought that there could, the creator of this universe could be plausible. There is some amount of um, separation between these two questions. Would you agree?
I'm not sure what you're getting at. I do acknowledge that it is possible that a God exists. I don't
Okay.
believe it does, but so when we're talking about possibilities in philosophy, we're talking about possible worlds. Is it so? Really, it's
But you
does it
would
violate?
absolutely rubbish the assertion that a demon would hurt your neighbor, right? With certainty, right?
If a demon existed, you've got to sort of more clarify what you mean.
No, the some of the superstitions that people, like the example that you gave,
Yeah.
wearing some sort of clothes or whatever it is, you would rubbish that with certain confidence. but you would not rubbish the thought that there is a creator is plausible with the same amount of confidence. That's the kind of differentiation that I'm talking about in this
Well,
spectrum
I
of
didn't
thought.
bring up demons. I didn't bring up demons. What I'm saying is, by the other, it is people we view as outside our in group, the out group. So my in group is, a white person with, you know, atheism or secular humanist, and people outside of that are the out group to me. But we have a tendency to look upon the out group as being more dangerous to us, and if you use critical thinking and evaluate things, that isn't actually true. You've got more chance of being unalived by one of your family members than you do a stranger, right? But our tendency is, my family's fine to me, and it's the stranger that is the threat. But we know from statistics that's not actually true, right? Like, this is the thing. A lot of these innate beliefs that have arisen over the years, when we actually break them down, they may not actually be warranted. So, sort of like a tendency to think that there is agency behind things, that I don't know how the wind is blowing things, I can't see anything, and it's making this things move. Humans have a tendency to think there is something doing that, but now we know that the wind is not, some kind of being causing it to rush in places. We know now that it is convection currents in the atmosphere that is causing a circular pattern of air moving that is creating wind.
Let us take examples that are fundamental, like, for example, origins of life and death, for example.
Right.
Okay. And, um, from nothingness, existence of something, you
What's
know,
nothingness? What are you defining as nothingness?
for example, I mean, we do know that our sun did not exist before, planet Earth did not exist before.
Well,
They came to be made.
Well, I mean, I hate to be pedantic, but nothing sort of just arrives. So what we sort of say in science is that things change state, right? Like, nothing just arrives by itself. Like, the sun just didn't arrive, or you didn't just arrive. Things change state. So, like, for instance, the Earth. Well, we know scientifically that it was created from an accretion disk, dust and debris and rock, that under the form of gravity, it would form a sphere naturally, because that's what happens under the effect of gravity.
Yeah, true. I mean, if you get back to fundamentals, gravity, the innate forces, the atom hydrogen, who
Yeah.
designed it, how did it self-design itself, and that became the basic fundamental building block of the entirety of the universe. So all of these fundamental questions go back to the design, and
Why does it need to be designed? Why
we
does it need to be
understand.
designed?
The question is this: anything that is functional takes intelligence. Like, we experience this. We cannot produce an outcome, a functional outcome, without the application of intelligence. So application of intelligence becomes a necessary parameter to produce a functional design. So if you go back to the fundamentals themselves, gravity, hydrogen, these are fabulous design features. And it's rational to assume that these were predicated out of intelligence.
How can you tell? I mean, I don't see any design in that. You're sort of talking about fabulous design, but I see them as naturally occurring elements. I think that you've
How
got to
does it
show that
naturally
they've,
occur? From where?
well, from the if you want to go back as far as we can go,
Yeah.
you have the start of the inflation period, of the Big Bang, as far as we know, the creation from a quantum vacuum out of sort of particles, virtual particles popping in and out of existence, um, and that's as far as we can tell, because before that, like before the origin of space time, we like our math breaks down and our equations break down. We cannot see
Okay.
past there. But what I'm more pushing back on is you're sort of going, well, these things are designed, but you're doing something that is sort of presupposing or begging the question. You're assuming they're designed without actually showing it. Because if the universe is
There
designed
is
for
no other recourse,
anything,
Mark. There is no other recourse.
what do you mean there's
You
no
you
other
just acknowledge
recourse?
the mathematics breakdown. There is no other recourse.
Sure. What do you mean? Well, no other recourse than what?
What I'm saying is all of these components, the fundamental components, they they do tell us or inform us of their versatility and functional, them being so effective and functional that they materialize in so many different things in the cosmos. So such a design that's so fundamental and is really thought out is what is my rationality dictating to me, or reasoning concluding to me. It's thought out, right? There's a designer behind it.
But it's
Okay.
not like we don't need a designer. All you have to do is have protons and neutrons like fusing under intense heat, and that causes hydrogen. There's no design required at all. And
And
why would it be
where
designed? You
where do you
still
think
haven't
those
answered
protons and
that
neutrons
question.
are emanating? Where do you think they're originating
I
from?
said a quantum vacuum.
Okay, fine. I mean, if that's something that we cannot really talk about, then we have to rely on uh, areas where we
Look,
can really have a discussion. So, I mean, going
Daniel,
back, yeah,
I will absolutely concede that
yeah,
I do not know the origin of the universe, right? Like I don't know where it came from. We cannot tell. But the
yeah.
problem there is you're sort of saying, "Hey, you don't know where the universe came from. It's a god." And I'm asking you, and this is designed, and there is nothing to lead me to believe that it's designed. And so a question would be,
There is
what
so much
hang on,
there is so much
just a
for you to
question,
convince. Yeah,
Daniel.
yeah.
If these things are designed, if the hydrogen atoms, which everything else came from through nuclear synthesis and all of the supernova and things like that, came from designed, it's all designed. What are you comparing it against that's undesigned? Give me an example of something undesigned.
Well, there is none. That's there is none to compare with. The position, I think, even in physics, in modern physics, is there's always been something. There was never a time when there was nothing.
That is one
Okay.
thing, yes. That
Okay.
is one hypothesis, yes.
Okay. So that's more plausible hypothesis for me rather than Big Bang that just comes out of nowhere. I would
Okay,
rely
I've
on.
got to stop you
Yeah,
there, Daniel, because the
yeah,
Big Bang is not the origin point of the universe. Okay,
yeah.
it's the start of the inflation period of the universe.
Okay,
Nobody says it's the start of the universe. Nobody says it came out of nothing, like
okay,
absolutely nothing.
okay.
When physicists refer to nothing, they're referring to a no space, no time, no matter,
But
no energy. But that doesn't mean that quantum forces can't still exist. So there is something. It's
I
just when
understand.
that, yeah. So
Yeah,
when you sort of say it comes from nothing, it's not nothing as in absolutely nothing. There is still, the
I
universe
understand.
is still there.
That's even my position. So that now let's talk about something we can bite on actually. So what I
Okay.
said was initially the assumption that there is a theory and you can't disprove it, so you're shifting the burden of proof,
Yes.
is tackled by my reasoning in this fashion that this agency has actually established communication with us. So once we have received communication, then that solidifies or establishes the position that this agency is real, exists. It's just not the memory, faint memory, or the tendency that humans possess. It's no longer just that, but we have received a confirmation of it because we have received communication from this particular agency. And where is the communication?
Yeah.
And that's where I'm pointing at. We have these
Okay.
communications preserved in the Bible and in the Quran, and now the question becomes, how can we validate that this communication has indeed been sourced from this agency. How can we establish that? That becomes the obvious question and objection. And
Sure.
therefore, there are certain tools with which to solve these objections. One of those is abyssal thinking, is what I call abyssal epistemology, which is the information that we have received from such a claim can be verified from our uh, reasoning abilities and faculties. So we put that information to test, and if the test stands, then we acknowledge the truth of that source. Okay.
I don't understand what you mean by that. Abyssal epistemology. So what you're basically saying that you evaluate it yourself and decide that it's correct or not. I don't understand what process, what methodology you're going through. So maybe you can outline the methodology for me.
Yeah, the methodology is as follows. Human beings who are researching metaphysics or philosophy in this area of concern, they have this
Mhm.
material to work with. The material being the communication that's come from this claim or from this agency, which is in this case, let's give it a word: Almighty God, the God of the universe, or God, the God of the human beings.
Well,
So
that
from
is
this
the claim.
claim,
That is the claim. Yeah.
from this claim, we have received information, and now this information can be tested by a body of experts in the
No,
field
the
of philosophy
information
and
the
sciences.
information is the claim. Like
Yeah,
what the book
exactly.
says is the claim. So
Yeah,
how do we test that?
yeah, that's fine. Now, to be able to test that is what I call abyssal thinking. Is we apply our faculty and our learnings to test or to verify whether this information is worthy enough a claim. Okay, is
I
worthy
don't
enough a
know what
claim.
you mean by worthy, but so when you sort of say we apply our faculty, that's not really a methodology. So you're sort of saying, hey, if people sort of look at it and say it's true, then it's true, and that is the case for every single religion in the world. So the
It's
problem with
it's
that
actually testable.
methodology,
It's actually
well, it,
testable.
it gets conflicting results. I will let you get there. What's how is it testable?
I mean, now what we have is, for example, in the Quran, there are claims of
Sure.
information that points at the natural world.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, in the Quran, God talks about how He created planet Earth and its different sky layers, for example. Okay. Now, that's a claim that we can actually go back to our laboratories and validate that information. Okay. So, if these
Does it
claims,
though?
yeah, sorry,
Does it though?
what?
Does the Quran talk about different atmospheric layers?
Yeah, it does.
And how specific does it get?
Very specific. And that's my first book all about.
It talks about the seven heavens.
Yeah, it talks about the seven sky layers. Yeah.
Is there seven sky layers?
Yeah, there are.
There's seven layers of the sky.
Yeah. That's my first book. And let me read that out to you.
Um, because sort of the layers of the atmosphere is sort of man-made. It's what we've described them as, like the troposphere and the all of these. There's not really, I don't think there is seven layers per se. It's just we've designated them as certain areas.
I understand. I mean, the Quran is not talking about troposphere or stratosphere or mesosphere. These are classifications. I could say subclassifications of based off of the temperature and pressure distribution of the atmospheric particles. Okay, these are subclassifications that we do. But what the Quran does talk about is the atmosphere as one layer that helps us in flight and helps the planet Earth to reflect the day side. All right. So that the Quran talks about the depth of atmosphere as one functional layer, and we subdivided. We divided like troposphere, mesosphere, and
Yeah.
we subdivided for our um, usage or utility, or based off of what we want to do in this layer, we can kind of subdivide them. All right, but what the Quran does talk about, the atmosphere as a whole, as a lumped body, is one sky layer that helps us in flight and helps to light up the planet Earth with daylight. Okay, and the Quran talks about other layers as well. It talks about
And what
plasma
does it
sphere, it talks about ionosphere, it talks about magnetosphere, it talks
but
about
what
the
does it
ozone
say
layer.
about the first layer, the closest layer?
So it says in the following manner. Let me share the screen with you here, so you can also take a look at that. Okay. Can you share it, Mark?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So that's the first layer the Quran talks about in the following fashion. Are you more difficult to create, or is the sky that God has built it? He has raised its sphere and proportioned it, and he darkened its night and extracted from it brightness as day. So that's a very clear indication of the atmospheric layer that partakes in lighting up the planet Earth. And also, if we get down, the same layer is being talked about as helping in facilitating flight, uh, bearing clouds, winds, and facilitating flight. So we do recognize now that beyond this layer, flight the flight path is severed, and what you need is rocket power to continue your journey into the space. So that's the first layer, and the
There's
second.
also more about the first layer in Quran 67. Al
Six,
Mulk. Hmm.
67.
Yeah, I'll just share that now. I'll
Okay.
share what I've got, and I sort of you'll see where I'm going with this,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And indeed, we adorned the lowest heaven with stars like lamps, and made them as missiles for stoning eavesdropping devils, for whom we have prepared the torrent of the blaze.
Yeah, as the phrase "asama ad-dunya" that's in the Arabic is a different firmament. It's not among the layers of the Earth's skies. So the phraseology that comes in this particular verse here, "asama ad-dunya," it talks about the firmament of the world, and the world in the Quranic sort of language is the Earth, Sun, and Moon system. That's the
But
world.
are
Yeah.
stars lamps in the lowest layer of the heaven?
So the lowest layer of the heaven is the cocoon of 80 million stars, in which our sun is also
Hmm.
a star.
Yes, is
That's
that
the that's
true? Do you
that's the,
believe
that's
that?
the lower heaven.
Yeah, do you believe that?
What?
That the lowest layer of these heavens, like you ascribe to it, like where birds and stuff are. Do you think that's where the sun and the stars
No,
are?
you're missing the point, Mark. That layer, I mean, that lowest layer that we
Hmm.
just saw in chapter 61, the phraseology there is as-sama ad-dunya, which is a different firmament. Okay, it's not talking about the layers of planet Earth. The sky layers that surround planet Earth are not that firmament. They're different. It's
Yeah,
different.
I don't think that you are actually representing that correctly. That is the lowest layer of heaven, which is the same as the layers of heaven that they were talking about. And
I have,
they're
in
and
fact,
regardless of
yeah.
which, stars are not lamps, and they're not thrown at devils. Shooting stars aren't even stars, right?
No, you have to have a. I mean, this is where engagement would help. Actually, I've written a book, and this book is like 350 pages, which might be
Well, what I want to get at is
yeah,
that
yeah,
these people shooting stars, right, meteorites,
yeah,
okay, that hit the ground, and they sort of said, "Hey, the stars are coming from the sky to hit demons their lamps." But that
yeah.
is not true, is it, Daniel?
Now look, the Quran is not saying that for your information. If you bring back that verse that you just shared with me, 67, please.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
So it is. I mean, it might be confusing if you go to the translation, the English translation. Okay, all right. I mean, you can ask me, oh, that's how it was understood by earliest Muslims, and all of that is a separate debate. Okay, but the English might be misleading. But when I'm reading this in the language, because I've written this book, I've done excessive studies of this theme of the heavens and the firmaments and the skies in the Quran. Therefore, I've written a book. All right. So when the Quran talks about we have indeed created the nearest heaven with lamps and have made them as repelling the jinn kind. Okay, and we have made them as a source of punishment for jinn kind. It's not talking about shooting stars. It's
What's it
talking
talking about?
about the architecture of stars. Okay, see, look, Mark,
Hmm.
you got to understand this, that the jinns that the Quran talks about that the Quran talks about, it talks about them as intelligent species, apart from human beings, inhabiting planet Earth,
Aliens.
and it talks about their space adventures in the 7th centuries. In the 7th century, the Quran informs us already that these jinn kind were already launching themselves in space in 7th century. We only made it 100 years ago, but the Quran informed us that jinns made it to the space in the 7th century and much before that. Okay, so when they are going out in the space and they are trying to listen into the celestial communication, and we do that today as well. I mean, we tap into these very remote signals that coming out of the celestial space, which we have not experienced before, for example these.
Whoops. Oh, sorry, mate.
So
Sorry, I
some of
clicked the
those
wrong thing.
things, sorry, some of those dynamic that happens in the celestial space was talked about in the Quran in the 7th century, that these jinns were already tapping down into the celestial space with their systems and instrumentation to tap into the signals to listen to the communication that goes on between angels and stuff like that. So this is that sky layer, and the Quran says the architecture of the stars actually prevents them from tapping into this information. Okay,
Yeah,
so that
I don't
that
believe that
that
for a
firmament is
second.
different. I mean, look,
Yeah,
this is what I call.
I don't. Yeah, but the problem is that we know that like that the stars are not falling from the sky to for devils or any other reasons. In fact,
That is
stars
not
don't
what that verse
fall
is
at
talking
all.
about, Mark. By the way, I should tell you that
Well, I think that sort
translation
of
might
when
be
you read it,
misleading.
well,
Yeah,
when you read it plainly, it seems to be referring to meteorites, and that is the most rational explanation for what they're
the
saying
in
there.
I get your point. I apologize, because this is the best that Muslims have offered in terms of translation. That's the need, and therefore I did my rendition of the Quranic verses in modern English based out of my works. You know what I want you to do. I mean, this is a request. If you can get hold of my book, which is like just a couple of dollars on Amazon, and you can give it a shot at chapter one, at least just one chapter one, and see how you go. Okay, so it is a worthwhile reading if you want to really critique the Quranic science. My book would be a go-to point, and then you can begin polemicizing against the Quran's concept of skies in as it comes in the Quran. I mean,
Hmm.
this is just my request. Okay, I mean, of course.
Well, I mean, what I
Mm,
don't understand is why
yeah,
it would like. I mean, you pointed to what Surah 79 and
yeah,
Surah 67 use the same word for heavens, like, and it
yeah.
uses the same phrasing. Like, I mean, it doesn't. It seems like sort of post hoc rationalization to say,
It is
hey, it means this other thing that it doesn't seem to say.
because the phrase is different. Even though the word sama is there, it's the same word. I understand that, but the
Yes.
phraseology, sama ad-dunya, is a separate phraseology. Okay, so that's what I said to you. I clarified to
Yes.
you. Dunya means a a combination of sun, earth, and moon system. That's the dunya. And when the sama of dunya is being referred, it's talking about a firmament that applies to all of these three bodies: sun, moon, and the earth system. So it's a higher
Okay.
firmament in terms of in terms of the larger cosmos.
Yeah, but
Okay.
Daniel, that's still a problem because stars are not in the sun, earth, moon system.
No, I mean that embodiment, that firmament is where the stars are. So that in that firmament, sun is a system. Sun is part of that
Yes.
firmament. Okay.
But
Yeah.
stars aren't in the sun's system. They're outside. What I'm getting at, what I'm really trying to get you to understand is that when they make all of these claims to the way the world is created, the way the world is organized, when it seems to line up, when it seems to be, oh, there's seven heavens and we have seven layers that we've separated the atmosphere in, there's five major and a couple of minor, that you say, oh, look at their great understanding. There's no way they could have known this. It is this amazing thing. And then when it doesn't, you say, well, it doesn't mean what it says. It means this other thing that, still doesn't make sense because the stars are, the closest star I think is about 4.2 million light years away from us. It is definitely outside the realms. And these stars that are shooting down to the Earth, you're saying, oh, they're not referring to meteorites. They're referring to some kind of, I don't know what you're talking about, some kind of non-human communications between angels and devils and things like that. I I I don't know in what universe you could get from, hey, the stars are shooting down in order to kill eavesdropping devils, to this long-winded explanation about demons and angels and communications and non-human intelligences and all of this stuff, when it's clearly talking about the same layer of heaven and the lowest layer of heaven. And the only thing I can see it described is shooting stars. I
Okay.
don't know how you get there.
Now let me clarify this to you. Actually, the book that I wrote is in 2018. So information is solidified in that book to be able to be critiqued. Okay. I'm not going back and forth and changing things in that book for your information. The book is already released. There's several copies that are already printed and stuff like that. So I would highly encourage you to go and have a read. Okay. Now, there is a concept in the Quran that talks about samawatul ula that comes in Surah 20. So when the Quran talks about samawatul ula, the major heavens, the major firmaments, of the major firmaments, this firmament that comes in Surah 67 is the lowest of the major firmaments. Okay, so um, there is a separation of the major firmaments and the sky layers of the earth. The sky layers of the earth do not interact with these major firmaments, which the Quran, by the way, refers to as samawatul ula, major heavens. Okay, so when I'm talking about the sky layers of the earth, the verses that we have to refer to in the Quran are different from 67, Surah 67. There are other verses in the Quran that talks about the seven different layers of the planet Earth.
Yeah, to me, it's just that seven is a sort of really beloved number by the Abrahamic faith, both, you know, um, Islam and Christianity. It's seen as a special number. And it is just coincidence that we separated and categorized the layers of the atmosphere into seven. Like, it doesn't actually speak to, like, how did they know that, or is it just a coincidence?
Um, I mean, I do get your point. We have 7 days in a week and stuff like that. You know, the Sabbath, and there is things there.
Yeah.
But when the
And
Quran
we
talks
call it
about seven,
we
yeah.
call it synchronicity, right? Like, it's called synchronicity. And what that is, it's when things align and people ascribe to it meaning when no meaning exists. like you said, I mean, I did a stream yesterday about numbers, and it was the 13th, Friday the 13th, and I was born on the Friday the 13th. Oh, it's this huge thing, and there's no reason why it should be, except that that number's significant to me, right? That the number 13, because I was born on a 13th, is significant to me. We call it synchronicity.
I get your point, Mark, but that's there. I mean, I'm not denying the fact that there is um, there is some form of a number game. I mean, that applies to human societies. I'm not denying that. But when you go to the Quran, verse chapter 2, and let me give you the verse. Just bear with me. Okay, verse number 29, please, if you can pull it up.
Yeah, sure. 229. Yep.
229, yeah.
Yeah, he is the one that created everything in the earth for you. Then he turned towards the heaven. Oh, wait a second. So he created the earth before the heaven? He turned towards the heaven, forming it into seven heavens. He has perfect knowledge of all things.
Okay, now look, assumptions might be actually confusing. All right. So prior knowledge of what a cosmos is, the cosmos is the heaven, might be actually confusing when you read this text. So when you're reading this text, you got to put this text in the context being the origins of planet Earth. So here, the Quran is not talking about the cosmos or the universe or anything like that. It talks about planet Earth being fashioned. Okay, so you put this verse in the context. So what you do come out of this verse is this: when the planet Earth was, the accretion disk was formulated and the material got assembled in a massive
Mhm.
proto Earth, the the sky that surrounded the planet Earth, the proto Earth, was filled up with smoke. Okay. And what God says, once He fashioned the proto Earth, He turned to the sky that was filled with smoke that engulfed the planet Earth, and He fashioned them into seven different functional layers. So, this is the planetary skies that I'm trying to actually talk to you about. Okay. So, here, the Quran gives you a very clear idea that during the early formation of the proto Earth, God fashioned the smoke that surrounded proto Earth in seven functional layers. When this comes out in terms of numbers, seven, it's an it's a claim that aligns itself in objectivity. So it's pretty easy to go and falsify this claim because it's dealing with numbers, and you can prove it six or seven or eight or any other number out of the infinite numbers that are at our disposal, and we can just
No,
prove the Quran
no.
wrong. Yeah,
Daniel, like just sort of
yeah.
saying, hey, this matches up in numbers. Like I just told you about synchronicity, coincidences do
That doesn't
happen.
apply
We
here. That's
know
what I'm trying to
this.
point out, Mark.
And the whole idea is that it is so vague as to what it means. Like at some points you're saying, well, heavens may refer to outside the solar system, and heavens refers to inside. So you're taking an interpretation of what this means and retroactively changing that interpretation to how it can fit the science we know. Right. So the old primordial Earth did not have a smoke atmosphere. It was mostly water vapor, nitrogen, hydrogen, things like that. There is no smoke there. I don't know how you got to smoke. And so, sort of saying, hey, the early atmosphere was as smoke, and then he made it into seven layers, is such a vague way of sort of trying to get the early atmosphere and the development of our atmosphere. Because don't forget, plants had to create, like, take in carbon dioxide and produce oxygen in order for our modern atmosphere to actually be created, right? Like this idea that, well, it was smoke and then it just formed these seven layers is so antithetical to what we know about the formation of the atmosphere that I don't even know. Like it seems to me that what you're doing is sort of doing a post hoc interpretation of what it says in there to align with the science that we are aware of.
Not necessarily, Mark. I mean, it might you might be coming. I mean, sorry to say this, you are actually approaching the subject matter from the standpoint of ignorance at this point, because it's understandable that you haven't really looked into this material in the Quran in a very um, detailed way, I should say. Which I have done. Basically, I've written a book about this, and I mean, I would love the idea that you actually deal with chapter number one in my two books, like Ancient Astronomy and The Creation of Planet Earth. These two books, if you can go through chapter ones from these two books, and we can have a very detailed conversation, and then your criticism would be actually um, appealing to me. At this point in time, I can see where you're approaching the subject from, and there is so much more that you are basically not having a clue or an idea. Okay, I can lead you through right now as we are talking about, provided you just open up to the information that I'm trying to give it to you right now.
Right,
Okay.
and I'm sort of just sort of pushing back on it kind of
Yeah.
thing
Sure.
because it doesn't seem um, like for instance, the layers of the atmosphere, there's really five main layers. So
Again,
does that
you're
make it wrong?
again when the Quran talks about these functional layers, it does not talk about the sub layers that we have come to sort of identify based
Then
off
it's
of the
wrong because
pressure and
there's
temperature
five.
profile.
It's only seven with sublayers. It's
No,
five.
Quran doesn't break up the atmosphere into sub layers. The Quran talks about atmosphere as one layer, where there is, and it defines it pretty much. It defines the atmospheric layer as having flight path and having a homogeneous distribution of molecules. Okay, that's the first layer the Quran talks about. The second layer Quran talks about is the
Does it
um,
say those words or is that your interpretation?
it's very apparent interpretation, though. I mean, it talks about the
Yeah, I
flight path.
don't. Okay, well, what verse is that? So if it's that apparent, I should be able to read it and go, "Yep, it's talking about molecules."
Okay, let me. I
It,
mean,
it
go back
doesn't
to
mention
79.
molecules, does it?
No, no, go back to 79. 79 verse number 29. It talks
Okay.
he he darkens its night and extracts from it brightness as daylight. So what is the extraction happening from? It's happening from the molecules.
Well, no, daylight happens from the sun.
Yeah, but if there were no molecules, then there would be no daylight as we find that today on
Yeah, there
planet
would
Earth.
be daylight. There just wouldn't be heat.
No, there would
Like there's daylight in space, Daniel.
absolutely. I mean, if you go to the moon, you would not find an ambience as you would find here on
Yeah,
Earth
it's a lot brighter.
because there is no molecules there on the moon.
Yeah, but it doesn't
Okay.
doesn't take away the daylight, Daniel. It makes it brighter because there's nothing absorbing those solar rays coming from the sun. So it's actually brighter on the moon
So,
than it is on Earth. What
s-
you would have, because none of the molecules are absorbing heat, well, what happens is shortwave radiation hits matter and it gets absorbed and released as heat, as long wave radiation. It would be cold but incredibly bright. So it is not the molecules giving you the daylight. It is the sun, and the molecules absorb some of the daylight, which is a good thing because we would have super cancer if it didn't.
so the molecules do partake in profiling the planet into blue light. Okay, they do.
Sure, but as I
Okay,
said,
and
like it
that's
would be a lot brighter without the molecules, like it is on the moon.
so on the moon. The surface of the moon is lit. Okay, but the atmosphere, the ambience would not be anywhere close as the Earth. You would find on the Earth the visibility is because of these molecules that interact with the solar radiation. The
So
same amount of
it,
visibility you would not have on the moon.
Which is harder for you to create, you or the sky? He built it. I'm not sure why you have to build the sky, but never mind. Raising it high and forming it flawlessly. He dimmed its night and brought forth its daylight. How
Yeah.
did you get to molecules from that?
I mean, how do you reckon the blue profiling of the daylight happens if there were no molecules? It would not happen.
But it doesn't mention blue light at
It
all,
mentions the extraction. يخرج, it mentions the word in Arabic يخرج is there. It mentions it's extracted from this
right?
sky layer. From this sky layer, it is extracted. So
But
this
but
sky layer
blue
has
light isn't
something that is
extracted. It's
participating in extraction.
So blue light isn't extracted. Okay, it's not extracted. It's that ultraviolet light is stopped by the molecules and most importantly, the ozone layer above us. It's not extracted.
Well, the
You're looking at it as the sunlight goes through and something is like comes out
no,
of that.
the sun's white light splits. Okay, and because of these molecules, the blue profiling happens.
Okay.
That's the process of extraction that the Quran talks about.
Yeah, I'm not convinced. I think that that's your
Well, you might have to
interpretation.
read into
Again,
it a
just
little bit more.
retroactively matched to what we know about the science, basically how things work. But is that what the author intended? I don't know. And I think that you're just saying, hey, this seems to fit with what we have because it is so vague. Here's the problem: it is absolutely so vague. If it was that, hey, refraction of the light caused some other effect to happen, you could tailor it to that as well, right?
It would be vague if it was one of the things. It is not vague when you have numbers to work with. When the Quran says it is seven, and then it works around it and gives you lists all of these seven different
Well,
layers. It's not vague when it's doing that actively. Okay.
let me ask you a
Yeah.
question because
Yeah.
that seems to. Would you agree that that's stating the origin of day and night? That he's basically extracting the daylight in order so it won't be dark anymore. That's day and night.
That's not day and night per se. Okay.
Okay. Well,
The, what the Quran does talk about is this sky layer partakes in extraction of light and the brightness. That's the bit it's trying to refer to.
so
So this
how does the
sky layer,
Quran explain day and night then?
the Quran does explain day and night through um, what is called as yukaviru, the verb yukaviru, which means spinning of planet Earth or rotation of planet Earth.
And which
Cover
surah is that?
verse number. Just bear with me. I'll have to find it. Okay, it's verse number 5 of the Surah 39.
Okay. He created the heavens and earth for a purpose. He wraps the night around the day and wraps the day around the night. And he has subjected the sun and moon, each orbiting for an appointed term. He is truly almighty. That's what you're talking about?
Yeah, the Arabic verb there, yukavviru, is the verb that translated as wrapping in the English
Mm-hmm.
language is actually rotations, right? So
Oh yeah, I mean we've known that um the we know we've known that Earth orbits the sun for a very long time.
yeah, not just that orbiting the sun, but it talks about yukavviru layla wa nahar in terms of rotations of the planet Earth, that these nights and days are changing or altering because of that rotation of the Earth on its own axis, not around the sun.
Yeah, I get that. It's just
Yeah.
it doesn't really say how he created. Like he just says he created the heavens and the earth. He wraps night around day and wraps day around night. It doesn't mention the sun at all
I mean, it need not mention the sun there. Why should it mention the sun? I mean, it does
well,
mention the sun as being.
because the night is not a thing. It is simply the absence of light. It's not
That's
a
correct.
thing.
That's correct. But from the human reference frame, we experience night
Hmm.
and day, and this dictation is being given to humans who perceive the natural world around them, and God tells them, "This is how I do it. Yukaviru layla wa nahara. This is how I um, alter alternate night and day by the rotational motion of the earth."
Well, it doesn't mention the
Yukaviru. I mean,
rotational of the
I
earth.
do understand the difficulty in translation because these translations don't really reflect the scientific side of the.
It only says he created Earth for a purpose. He said he wrapped night around day and wraps day around night. It doesn't say he wrapped them around anything. It just says he
No, that's
wrapped them
correct.
around.
The very word, you're reading off the English, the very word in Arabic, yukavviru, comes out of the root kavara, which means to spin like a ball.
But the day and night aren't spinning.
Um, In fact, they are around the earth spins.
The Earth spins, that's right. But what it
That's
doesn't
correct.
say is that the Earth spins, creating the day and night. It doesn't say that.
No,
So
that's what
here's where
exactly.
your interpretation is going way too far because these are vague. And you're saying, hey, this is what it means when you have an incredibly generous interpretation. And look, you're not the only one that's doing it. Christians do it with the Bible as well. They do it with the New Testament as well. They take an incredibly generous interpretation to what they want it to be. And this is a problem because
It
if he was to write, hey, this is how the world works, it would be the earth spins creating a day and night, which he didn't do.
Well, it could be one of those little things if the scripture did talk about as cherry picked information. I could agree with you. But what the Quran does provide is a fuller concept of the creation, excuse me, of the creation of planet Earth and its seven layers. And it describes this whole system in great detail. And
It's not
you
great
will,
detail.
I mean, it is great detail. I
It
mean,
is not great detail.
I've written a bookmark, I've written a book on it. I've written, in fact, two different books on it. My first book talks about the
It
sky
doesn't
layers.
matter if you, anyone can write a book, Daniel. It doesn't
Look,
matter.
I mean, we can talk about it endlessly. I'm prepared. You don't have to necessarily read my book. I can take you through. I can journey with you, but it might take you a little time because you're coming off based off negation or not ready to
It's
accept
called
the information as
skepticism.
you're coming off skepticism. That's correct. So
Hmm.
right now, for me, it'll be um, a matter of time to be able to go through the information with you and sort of convince you on the information that comes in the Quran is a comprehensive concept that comes in the Quran. It's not that the Quran is providing you standalone versus cherry picked information that can be easily dismissed, stating, oh, this is post hoc rationalization or whatever it is. But when I present to you the entirety of the concept, then you will be amazed. You will be amazed. I mean, if you want, we can do that straight away.
Well, no, I think it's not really like I don't have time to go
Yeah.
over something at the moment, like an entire book at the moment. But to me, it sounds like when I bring up things like shooting stars, which is widely acknowledged in multiple places in the Quran as lamps that
But
are
not in
to
that place, not in that
ward
67
off
though.
jinn. You're sort of going to, well, that's not what it means. It's sort of this other thing, and it's sort of it really is starting to sound like your interpretation will change depending on what you need it to be. And this is a problem we have with like a lot of people in the way they interpret books and way they interpret things. They will basically take not what the thing is saying. It even happens in science where people will take papers and go, well, it's saying this when it doesn't actually say what they're claiming it to say. right? Like people basically get the most favorable interpretation. And so skepticism says you should look at it critically, right? Like, does it actually say what you are saying it says? Or is that something that you've interpreted from the words that are laid down? Right?
I, I
That's critical
totally get your
thinking.
point. I totally get your point, and I'm with you. Totally get your point.
Hmm.
That those subjective renditions do happen a lot in with scriptures, with people of religion who are trying to understand these things from their own lenses and from their own awareness of what knowledge is and how much they know of the natural world. It does happen. I'm not denying the fact that it won't happen. But when we have information in the Quran which graduates greater than being just being subjective, for example, it gives you the numbers to work with, seven. Um, uh, it is saying something. I mean, at least it's asking you to engage with it and know what it is talking about those seven different layers.
Yeah, but there's 5 layers.
No, you're not. What I'm saying
There's
is
five main layers, and then we add like the mesosphere, right? Like it's a sub layer that isn't really different than the rest of it. It is a border between two. So what I'm saying is that
so.
if
What
there
are
are
the five
five
layers that you're
layers,
talking about? What are those
okay,
5 layers?
all right. Well, give me one second. I'll look it up. I'm not really. Um, uh, so if you are wrong and there are 5 layers, does that make the Quran false?
We can examine what it is,
No, no,
and
no.
then
I want to know this up front. If it turns out that the Quran is wrong about something, does it falsify the Quran?
100%.
100%. Okay.
Yeah.
So the main atmospheric layers are the troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere, and exosphere.
Okay. So, what is the composition of these layers?
What do you mean? What's the
What are
composition?
these layers composed of?
I mean, the troposphere is our current layer. It's not apart from us. We're in it right now.
Okay,
It's
for
sort of
what is the altitude of it and what is the composition of it?
I mean, it's 0 to 12 kilometers.
And composed of air molecules?
Well, yeah, it's got like most of the air molecules because of gravity, right? So all of
Okay.
them are down
So what's the
here,
next
sure.
layer? What's the next layer?
Stratosphere, 12 to 50 kilometers.
And what is it composed of?
It's sort of air particles which are less dense or less dense
Okay.
air.
Okay.
It's comprised of the ozone layer, ultraviolet
Okay.
radiation.
Okay.
I
Okay.
don't know.
Okay. Now let me have this discussion here. Now stratosphere still composes air particles, but it is less dense. But troposphere has higher density of the air molecules, correct?
Yeah,
Okay. Now both of these layers partake in flight path, correct? You
no.
can still fly, you can still fly in stratosphere.
Well, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now the Quran talks about these two layers as just one layer, because the Quran is not differentiating based on the temperature and the pressure profile of this layer. The Quran is talking about functional layers as a whole. So when the Quran talks about the first layer, it talks about a layer that allows the flight path, and it's got air in it, whether it
So
is highly dense
what's the
at the
second
bottom.
layer then?
Okay, the second layer in the Quran is a ionized layer. Okay,
An
it's where
ionized layer.
the particles are rarefied, ionized, basically plasma turned into plasma, right?
What?
Yeah,
Plasma.
yeah.
You're saying there's plasma in our atmosphere.
Yeah, there's a sphere called plasma sphere.
No, there's an ionosphere, I think.
Yeah,
I
ionosphere is
think.
also made out of ions, but there's a beyond ionosphere. There's a layer. There's a sphere called plasma sphere. Just type plasma sphere on Google.
Plasmasphere.
Yeah,
Which is in the magnetosphere.
yeah.
Okay. So these are names given to areas in the atmosphere, but they're not layers themselves. Like that is in the mesosphere, right?
The Quran talks about a
Magnetosphere.
construction that overlaps these layers. The Quran talks about these sky layers as overlapping each other. Okay.
Okay, so what's the layer above that?
So it's technically not like above and in a fashion of altitude, but these are functional layers that are overlapping. And when the Quran talks about ozone, okay, it is still sitting within um, the first layer technically. Okay,
I doubt that the Quran mentions ozone at all.
no, it does
Okay, so it mentions ozone,
as a protective layer, as a
the
protective layer,
molecule ozone.
as a protective layer for safeguarding life.
Okay, but it doesn't mention ozone.
Obviously, this term ozone is a modern term. Obviously,
Hmm.
it's not stating in the Arabic language as ozone. It's referring to it with the same word sama. Okay, but the phraseology is what facilitates the interpretation that this is the layer that's being talked about.
Yeah, so it doesn't actually mention ozone layer.
It does. It does. It talks about it being bina'a, being built with these um, units. Like for example, ozone built as O3. It it's the same unit, like a brick, oxygen like a brick that's being used to build this sky layer. So the Quran talks about this sky layer in this language, and for the function being to protect the life on planet Earth.
Yeah, I think that it just says a well protected roof or guarded canopy, and it's not a roof.
Okay, I mean, we just have to become
It's
familiar with
not
the
a
language.
ceiling. Yeah,
We,
so what you're doing here is you've got some hyperbole, right? That the atmosphere is a ceiling, right? That it's a roof, it's a ceiling, it's a canopy. That's hyperbole. And it's interesting that you use that as hyperbole and sort of poetic language, but when it says it's well protected, you're immediately going to, well, it matches up with our scientific understanding of what the ozone layer does. I don't know that's the case. I mean, they might have be thinking that it protects you from the lamps that are falling
so look,
out of the
you are
sky.
making an assumption here, Mark. You're assuming that.
Me making an assumption,
Yeah,
really? Me?
let me finish.
Ironies in the chat, please. Ironies in the chat.
Let me finish this. Let me finish my statement.
Okay,
You're
okay.
assuming Arabic people, Arabs who wrote this, may not have intended it. I'll give it to you. If Arabic people wrote it, obviously they would not be intending this information to communicate this information. But it is not the Arabs who wrote this. If it was God who was giving us this information, then God
Hmm.
is intending it. All right. So that's the
Yes, but
difference.
your
Yeah.
original argument was that the seven layers match up with our understanding of the seven layers of the atmosphere. But those layers are not there's not seven, there's actually five. So that's sort of falsified. And then
No.
you're saying sort of saying, hey, it's using a different evaluation to separate these layers. Well,
Yeah.
in that case, it is inaccurate because we've got accurate information about that the troposphere is a different layer than the ionosphere, right?
Of course, from the ionosphere, it is a different layer. I'm not stating that it is the same layer as the ionosphere,
Right.
but stratosphere that you initially
Hmm.
mentioned, stratosphere and troposphere is the distinction that we draw based on the utility that we want to have in these layers. But God is not subject to that. God considers these two layers, stratosphere and the troposphere, as one.
And so the one above that contains the ozone layer.
If the ozone layer sits within this as a separate unit. So God talks about the design of these sky layers as overlapping each other.
Okay, so what's the top layer? What is that?
The overarching layer is the magnetosphere the Quran talks about. Okay, you might get you might feel I am doing this post hoc rationalization just because I'm talking to you about magnetosphere, plasmasphere, ionosphere, and things like that. I can understand the difficulty that you might have. That's why I'm asking you to at least have one cursory read of chapter one from my book. Okay, so if you did that, then you would know what I'm talking, and you can
Yeah.
then come up with
The
criticism, right?
problem is the magnetosphere is
Yeah,
different than the atmospheric
it is
layers, right?
different.
You're
Yes,
now making a category error because you're including the magnetosphere as one of these layers when instead the magnetosphere is something completely different. It is the magnetic field that surrounds all of
yes,
the Earth and goes through all of the layers.
absolutely.
So when you say the topmost layer is the magnetosphere, then you've
Yeah.
just sort of collapsed your entire model.
No, I'm not collapsing it. The Quran talks about these layers that actually envelop the earth. Okay. So all of these different layers that go on to envelop planet Earth are the functional sky layers with which God protects planet Earth from the blustering sun. So these all of these different
Does it
layers
say it protects
form
them from the blistering sun? Does it say that outright?
when it talks about roof,
No, no,
roof
no,
is
Daniel. Does
look,
it protect? Does it say it protects the Earth against the sun?
okay, let me look into this verse. Okay. If you want to pull this up, it's
Yeah,
21.
so this is what I'm talking about. You sort of have got these preconceived ideas of what these sort of say, and then your interpretation, you will add things onto them to say, oh, it matches up with what we know that the atmosphere does. But the Quran, nowhere does it say it protects you from the sun. That's the problem. Like they're so vague about what it protects you from. And then when there is something that is so obviously untrue that falling falling stars are lamps thrown at devils, you're like, no, that can't possibly be talking about falling stars. It's something completely different. It's some radio transmissions against non-humans. And it gets into this whole idea of this is your most charitable explanation based afterwards on what you, because the original people after this was written weren't talking about this like it was, you know, ozone and atmospheric conditions and, you know, the magnetosphere and things like that. They weren't talking like this.
I
They
know they
had
weren't.
their current understanding in their own time.
I know the fact that those people were not talking about those things, and that is why I'm saying the assumption that people wrote it may be becoming an obstacle for you to understand the gravity of the information that you're dealing with the Quran. If God was communicating this, then He was intending to communicate these things. Okay. See, another piece of information
That's, hold it,
that
Daniel,
might
that's a
ignite
big
curiosity in
if.
you.
That's a big if.
That's correct.
Right. And so what I look at is which is more plausible, that a God wrote these things but conveyed them in such a way that they were really vague and, you know, there was some stuff that seems obviously wrong, or that humans wrote it with their understanding of the world and just happened to get one or two things right based upon their observations of the world.
Not necessarily, Mark. If God is writing this, it's a big if, and this is
Yeah.
why the falsification is implied. God is saying, if this text, if this information isn't from God, then you must be able to identify falsities in it. If you cannot identify falsities in it or errors in it, then the only outcome that you have to come to conclusion is that this is indeed from God.
No, that is not how that works, because I've just identified where it's been wrong about what shooting stars are for a start.
No, it's
Um,
not talking about shooting stars, though. All right.
yeah, so you say, but the interpretation from scholars, you must admit, all the way up until the modern day, has been he is talking about shooting stars. Correct?
The Quran does talk about shooting stars, but in chapter 55, not in chapter 67.
Let's see. Um, shooting star. It talks about shooting stars. Is that what you're saying? Shooting stars.
Yeah, again, look, shooting stars is a language that people used, okay? But
Yes,
obviously,
it
there's
is.
no phraseology in Arabic that says shooting stars, okay?
Well, it's
But
something
when
that
people translate that, they do it in that
yeah.
fashion. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is something that they observed in the world around them. Like most peoples, they did observe the sky a lot. I'm not saying that Muslims did not, like, they're intelligent people. They paid attention to the travels of the stars and how they moved, and they would have obviously seen these things. But I cannot find in this verse anything that talks. It says mentions stars, but not shooting stars. Um, but I I okay. Um, but for all of the scholarship of the Quran through this time, they've sort of said, hey, this verse about stars being lamps in the sky is how they understood it. Just
I can,
quickly, sorry to do this. Just quickly, I just got a super chat from Professor
sure.
Hizzle for $5 US. Thank you, Dan. You cannot expect people to buy your book in order to understand your argument and debate. You are supposed to bring the source. Look, seriously, Hizzle, this isn't a debate. We're just having a discussion between two people. I don't see any problem with saying, hey, I've referred to this in my book and referencing it. But yeah, I must admit I can't just dash away and read a book right now. It is. But Daniel understands that, dude. Like, seriously. But thank you so much for your support. I appreciate it. Sorry, Daniel. It's just, yeah. No, I get what he's saying, but
Yeah,
you know,
I get what he's saying. No problem at all. I mean, this is why these sort of engagements become important, because
yeah,
information that was foreign to some people, it'll take some time before their sort of mind settles with it. So it's a matter of time. I do acknowledge that. And something that I want to show you is in chapter 71, which might spark your curiosity. Okay, if you want to pull up that verse from chapter 71. Um,
yeah. So I'm just reading here, and I mean, this do take it with a grain of salt. It's just what I've looked up on Google. But sort of Ibn Kathir and early commentators on the Quran explain these are meteors or meteorites. Basically, they believed that for many, many, many years is what it's saying.
look, Ibn Kathir also talks about the earth being placed on the back of the whale, gigantic whale. If this is the guide to go to
Yeah.
guy, then I'm not in favor of it. Okay, some of these people, commentators and exegetes, they are sitting in the ancient world, having an
Yes.
ancient worldview, and they are
Yes.
commentating about the Quranic verses in from their own reference frame,
Yes.
and that's not what the Quran is talking about. Okay,
How do you know?
because this is where the claim is the Quran is a dictation of Almighty God. Okay, that's the claim.
That's
And
the
to be able
claim.
to
Yeah.
falsify the Quran, you can't
No, no,
go to
no.
these exegetes. You have to go to the Quran and then be able to falsify it. Okay,
No,
you can't
that's
go to
not
the
how
exegetes.
claims work, Daniel. I don't make a claim and then you have to falsify that claim, right? That is called shifting the burden of
Okay, but
proof.
why do you
Because
even go
if
to these
I make a
exegetes?
claim, you've
Yeah.
got to then, like, you can just say, hey, you've got to provide solid, reliable evidence that that claim is true, right?
Okay,
Not the other way round.
I'm ready to shoulder that responsibility. Okay, all you need to now do is sort of engage with the content that I'm trying to give you. So if you go to chapter 71, verse number 15, just that curiosity is sparked in your inquiry, so you consider it to be worthy enough to go and look into my work, right? So if you go to um, chapter 71 verses 15 to 16, this is an amazing piece of information that should spark curiosity in you. Okay.
Placing the moon within them as
Yeah.
reflected light and the sun as a radiant lamp.
Now, okay, hang on, don't mix up things. Now, the Quran talks about, do you not consider how God has created overlapped seven sky layers and
The moon is
placed the
not
moon therein
within
as lightsome?
the moon is not within the atmosphere.
It is. That's the point. That's the point.
You think so?
It is placed within these sky layers of the Earth. The plasma sphere and the magnetosphere envelop the moon.
Well, the moon's got its own sort of magnetic field.
That's fine. That's fine. But the Earth's magnetic field and the Earth's plasma field envelop the moon.
Yeah,
The
I'm not
exosphere,
sure it's.
basically, the exosphere envelop the moon.
Uh, no.
It does.
But the exosphere is only out to like 10,000 kilometers.
Um, Depends on how they classify exosphere there, but the exosphere is the layer that goes all the way to um, where it basically ends. Okay, so it encompasses the whole of the plasma sphere, the tail of the plasma sphere, basically, that encompasses the moon within it.
Okay.
Okay, so now this kind of information shouldn't necessarily spark inquisitiveness. So I'm telling, if you want to give it a shot, my book, chapter number 1 from 2 of my books, okay, that'll be fantastic. I mean, if you want, I can pull up my books on Amazon and show you.
Yeah, well, link it in the chat. Like, link it if you drop it into the chat, the private chat here. I can link it for you. Or if you just send it to me in some way,
Let me
um,
just open up
I
here.
can.
Let me just open up here. Like, if you can share the screen.
Oh, sure.
Okay, this is the first book that I wrote. It's Ancient Astronomy, Allah's Narrative, in which I'm talking about the different sky layers of the Earth. Okay, and this book is the second book that talks about the creation of Earth and origins of life. So, chapter 1 from this book and the previous one is where the complete idea of planetary creation has been discussed. Okay, so if you just read chapter 1 from both of these books, you will get a comprehensive idea of what the Quran is saying about how the creation of planet Earth and its sky layers were organized. Okay.
That's your book, is it?
Yeah.
Masood Ahmed.
Yeah, that's my name. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, but you just go by Daniel these days,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. On YouTube,
okay, gotcha.
I
Okay.
go with Daniel.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's just checking. I just seemed like I've got a link for it. Give me one sec, and I'll post it in the chat. So if you are interested in Daniel's book, check it out. Um, yeah, to me, when coming at claims, um, really, what we do in skepticism is basically that. Cheers, thank you. I can just grab that. What we basically do is we come in as somebody makes a positive claim, right? And the claim may be that, hey, I have superpowers, or I have a pet dog, right? Like, there's two different types of claims, or not two different types, but there is claims are generally the evidence required for them is generally to do with the extravagance, or the how little the claim fits within your current understanding of reality, basically. So I think Christopher Hitchens or made it popular as like extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, right?
Absolutely.
So I sort of agree with that. And the fact that you've got to sort of take an interpretation and sort of slot things in which people at the time and people later on did not understand, it seems really far-fetched to me, because I can do that with just about any holy text in the world. In fact, the Hindus sort of say, hey, there's matches with, the it has the most accurate portrayal of the age of the earth kind of thing, and they're not wrong. Like, it actually is the most accurate about all the religions. I do notice, though, this verse mentions Noah as well, which
Yep.
I don't know if you believe in Noah's flood, a worldwide global flood, but that is one of the stories that I find to be absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, the impression of Noah's flood is not a global phenomenon not in the Bible, not in the Quran. Okay, because the biblical language uses words from a reference frame, and when it uses the word world, it was from the reference frame of Noah's population, Noah's um, habitation. So habitation becomes the world for the people. You know, our world is Australia, for example. So the same applies to Noah. But if interpreters today look at it and go like, "Oh, it was actually a global flood," now that's a that's the kind of interpretation which is what is called as ICGCs, because you're not living those times, you're not understanding hermeneutics, you're not understanding from how it was communicated to our people back then, and now you're making a massively different claim of a global flood which is not really substantiated in those narrations. So
Well,
the
I
Quran
would
nor the
argue,
Bible talk about global flood. They don't.
yeah, I would argue, Daniel, that you're using the same eisegesis into your Quran and all of these, sort of layers of the atmosphere. Because if it's not matching up with the scientific layers, then they could be anything, right?
No, I mean, science can look into these things, these claims, and go like, why the Quran does that in this way, and um, is there substance for the Quran to work out these layers in in the manner it does, evaluates those layers to be, and then if there is a scientific criticism
Hmm.
at the Quran, then I would be interested in looking into what the scientists have to say about it. Okay,
Right, but you must admit, and I really want to get to the bottom of this, that your
yeah.
original argument using this was that it matched what the science said about the layers of the atmosphere.
That's correct. Even now, I mean, even now, because those sublayers that we are talking about are the sublayers based on the temperature and the profile and the pressure profile of the atmosphere. But when the Quran talks about functional sky layers, it is at a higher level of um, discourse of what these layers are and how they functionally work together, right?
Yes,
So look,
so there's look, there's five main layers of the atmosphere, not seven. Okay, and I get that you're saying, well, it's talking about something different and it's basically merging these two, but your original argument is that the seven layers it talks about is the same seven that or it matched up what we knew about the atmosphere, and it doesn't because there's five. There's also the ionosphere as a sublayer and the stratosphere and menopause, right? Like mesopause, sorry. So in actual fact, if you include the sublayers, there's eight.
no, the thing is, when you're talking about sublayers, for example, you're talking about ionosphere being the sublayer. The reason being, when we map out the layers of the Earth, we go like 1 to 12 kilometers, 12 to 50 kilometers, 50 to 500 kilometers, 500 to 5,000, or whatever it is. We are measuring based on the altitude, okay? And then we are subclassifying ionosphere as a sublayer, which is what not the Quran, which the Quran does not do. In the Quran, the ionosphere is a distinct layer. It's not a sublayer in the
Yeah,
Quran.
I get that,
Okay.
Daniel. But were
Yeah.
you going on about 7777? It's the same as what we understand at seven. What I'm getting at is that argument doesn't actually match because
It
we
does
don't
match
see them as seven.
because you are subdividing certain layers. Functionally, how do
I'm
you
not subdiv
justify?
I'm
Now
not
I'm
subdividing
asking.
layers.
Now
I'm
I'm
not.
asking, how do you justify the division of troposphere and stratosphere? Don't tell
Well,
me just because you find ozone in it, I'm therefore subdividing it. Don't do don't come up with that justification.
yeah, it's separated by the weather patterns that occur in both of them
That's
and the
it.
types
That's it.
of.
So it's not
Yeah,
functionally different. It's not functionally different.
it is.
It's not.
It
What what
is.
what are the implications for it to be
Well, the
functionally different? What I am saying to you is when the Quran talks about the first layer, it talks about the homogeneous atmosphere, which permits flight path. That's a functional separation. So flight path is possible in troposphere as well as in stratosphere. So the Quran doesn't subdivide them. It considers them to be one unit, one functional firmament.
Yeah, I'm just looking up now. Basically, yeah, the Earth's ozone layer is in there, but it's nearly cloud and weather free, so it doesn't have the same atmospheric conditions that the
But it
troposphere
permits
does.
a flight path.
Well, sure, that's because it's not air free.
That's correct. So the functional sky the Quran talks about, the first one, the homogeneous sky, permits flight path.
But so does the mesosphere. We send rockets up there all the time.
No, that's not flight path. That's a rocket power. It's a different trajectory of. You
Are
don't
you
have.
are you saying that the people back in the days of the Quran were separating the atmospheric layers to where we can allow planes or rockets to get to them?
Now, this is the assumption that you're drawing that people wrote it. It's God's dictation, Mark.
How do you know that?
And that's what God says. If it is not from God, there would be errors in it. And if you have found errors in it, then you falsify the claim that it is come from God.
But every time I'm bringing up an error in the book, you are using apologetics to basically come up with an excuse of why it is not an error and basically rationalizing that it's not an error if taken with a certain interpretation, with a certain sort of spin on it, that will forgive the error.
Look, the difficulty being you're referring to translators of the Quran who translated it not for scientific purposes. They translated it for faith purposes. Okay, so when you go and refer to those translations, obviously you're going to get a incorrect idea from the scientific point of view, and that's where my work becomes important because I have done a thorough work on this subject matter in the Quran, and that's where my work gains the sort of importance that
But what I'm finding frustrating, Daniel, is you've sort of said that there's 7 layers and that matches our understanding. But that what I just want you to acknowledge is that is not a valid argument because it doesn't match our knowledge. That there's 5 layers under our model. So your original argument, like, because I could separate them. I could look at it and say, hey, I'm going to put the stratosphere, troposphere, and mesosphere together because they have air, and then under a certain amount, because what we're talking about with the atmosphere is a spectrum, right? So depending on changing the criteria, I could put the separations wherever I wanted.
yeah, but if look, if scientists who are experts in this area can go at my book and see those um, 7 distinct layers and go like, oh, it doesn't really make sense, it's absurd, and the way we have modeled it makes perfect sense, I would then agree with them based on the justification they provide me. Okay. In fact, I took my book to the astronomers here in UniSA, but they dismissed engagement with it straight away by looking at it and
Yeah,
calling it as a religious literature. I couldn't
it
help. I
is.
mean, I did my best to take the book, physical book, to them and give it to them, but
Yeah.
they saw the cover and they dismissed it. That's fine. Whatever they did, I'm not complaining. What I'm saying is, this is where engagement is needed. If there is a claim and you can look at the claim and engage with it and then critique it, that's the kind of feedback I am looking at right now for me to go and like say, oh, okay, the Quran was massively wrong because it just made claims that cannot be substantiated by science. And therefore, from the lens of abyssal epistemology and thinking, the Quran fails and is falsified. But that
Well,
is not happening.
so the problem, Daniel, is that that's not what scientists do, and it's not what science is for. In order to form any hypothesis, you have to have some kind of falsification criteria. And the problem that we keep running into is that if we read the text and it doesn't match up, there still doesn't seem to be a falsification criteria.
There is
Because,
a falsification criteria because I have
okay,
synthesized it in my book.
okay, so what's the criteria for being falsified?
I mean, if the information that I'm talking in my book about these, what these different layers are, 7 different layers, if scientists go like, no, this is incorrect because of these many different reasons, I can look into those reasons, okay, and I can consider their validity and go like, okay, yeah, I really had a very incorrect
So
understanding of the sky layers of the earth,
if
and Quran is wrong.
if the best way of categorizing the layers are seven under the conditions, under functionality that you're talking about, why do scientists categorize it under five, mostly associated with atmospheric and physical, you know, particle conditions? You know, how much air and how much, the clouds are forming and things like that.
Because
Why do they categorize it that way?
those are the sort of information that helps us forecast the weather better. Okay, we have other agendas with it. We have our own motivations with it. So based on our needs and utilities, we subclassify them or classify them the way we deem fit. But
Yeah,
our
but there's
classification is not functional. I mean, it may be
yes,
functional
but
to us in terms of predicting the weather, but the epistemology of the Quran, when it talks about these layers, is different. It's God's view, right?
well, you would have to sort of say, hey, the function of flying was the way that they're doing it. But I don't see any reason why we would separate instead of doing it in an empirical way, depending on sort of the atmospheric conditions. Why functions to humans would be the way that we categorize layers is absurd because that's entirely subjective surrounding our technology and the advances that it's made.
Absolutely, I agree with you. It is a subjective classification, and
Then
mainly,
why use it?
I mean, sometimes it is useful for us to predict the weather. I mean, it's a handy thing to do, right? But this is where it is. I mean, Mark, look, if this, I mean, scientists they read all kinds of books. They even write on religion, like they critique religion. Like, for example, um, Richard Dawkins or Lawrence Krauss. These are scientists who also write literature critiquing religion. So why can't they spare time to just look into few chapters of my books and then be
I
able to
don't know.
critique?
I don't speak
Yeah,
for them,
yeah,
but
that's fine. Yeah,
really, it's because um, if we're going to do a scientific analysis on some claim, it's not going to be reading a book and critiquing it. It's going to be how do we test it empirically, not
yeah,
not subjectively, like how do I interpret this book to fit. It's empirically
yeah.
to validate the claims made in it. And from what I can see, there is no falsification criteria
There
for this
is.
book.
Why not? Why not?
Because
When
when I've
especially
brought
when
up
you're working with
objections, you
numbers.
basically will change the definitions that people have understood for years to say, hey, that's not what they were talking about.
Look, this is not impossible a task to do for human beings, and we are actually a very smart species, and we have amazing prowess in terms of knowledge and wisdom. This is a doable task, and
Well,
it has to be endured. Yeah,
yeah, I do apologize. It's been 2 hours. I do have another super chat. So I'll do this last super chat.
sure.
Ninjester for $2 says, Daniel, Google doesn't seem to know about a book. It's okay. I've linked it and pinned it in the comments. So it's still got a link there if you do want to check out Daniel's book on Quranic sort of, what was it? Quranic astronomy? Astronomy, yeah. Allah's narrative, Quranic astrology.
Ancient
So
astronomy, ancient astronomy.
Ancient Astronomy, Allah's Narrative. So if you do want to check it out, it's available paperback, Kindle. You can grab it on Amazon. But yeah, I think I'll call it there. I'll give you the last word. I just, for a claim such as a god was, sort of relaying scientific evidence to an ancient peoples, I would expect a lot more specificity and a lot more accurate knowledge to what we know now. So, with such a sort of large claim, I think that the evidence has to be stronger than sort of, people's interpretation of this could match things that we've discovered today. because you can do that with any book. But that's where I'm at the moment, Daniel.
Absolutely. I
But I'll
totally
give
agree
you the
with you.
last word. Go for it.
I
Last
totally
word.
agree with you. I mean, this is why I love talking to people who are skeptics or people who come from the standpoint of skepticism. I've enjoyed it. And the outcomes of these writings are because I had these interactions with the atheist community. Okay. I mean, look, these are massive claims, of course, and massive amount of evidence exists. The evidence is captured in my books. Okay, I'm open to understanding. I'm open to correction, and if people can read these books, literature, and come and tell me how I'm wrong or how things are wrong, how things are different, why we look at things differently, and that is the sort of engagement I would love to have, and I would love to make. In fact, I would love to see. I mean, the Quran being falsified. How can a text survive the length of history, not having being um, effectively debunked? You know what I mean? So there is a lot in the Quran to be dealing with, and also in the Bible. Okay, but yeah, I mean, these are the sort of conversations that I'm willing to have. I mean, if people, audience here on your channel, look into my channel, they would have a first-hand understanding of what I do, what I'm looking forward to in terms of engagement. And I would love engagement from the audience as well. If they want to come and grab a discussion with me, just shoot me an email. The email is on my description on YouTube. So yeah, thank you, Mark. This is a lovely thing. I mean, I was
Yeah,
intending to
yeah.
talk about morality here today and how atheism and Islam relate to the world, which apparently we did not discuss much. But I would love to have a discussion on up that front on
Yeah,
how
yeah,
atheism and
absolutely.
Islam relate to the modern world, and how morality functions, and if morality is evidence at all. Like, I do know people of religion make morality as a big piece of evidence for God, which I don't do that. Okay, so it'll be interesting conversation,
Yeah.
and yeah, looking forward to
Yeah, yeah.
more of these, Mark.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Well, it's two of my favorite subjects you sort of hit on early. The word I didn't even get to it. Like, we sort of just did astronomy, cosmology, and the Quran at the
Yeah,
moment. But
yeah,
sort of evolution's one of my favorite topics, and so is
yeah,
morality. So maybe we can line those up.
yeah.
Do you support evolution, or is that something that you don't support?
um i I don't support evolution on its premise, how it's defined and narrated to the world. Okay,
Okay.
but we do have instances in the Quran where the Quran talks about um, placental changes that have happened in certain species.
Okay. Oh, well, I
Okay,
mean, it sounds like a fascinating discussion.
yeah,
Like, I won't start another argument right now, but it sounds like a fascinating thing. And I want to thank Robin for introducing us. Thank you so much, Robin. She sends in a $2 super chat. Thank you, Mark and Daniel. You're very welcome. It was a great discussion. Like, we disagree, but it's totally fine. We can disagree, and that's
yeah.
fine. People can disagree and still get along fine. So
Thank you,
thank you
Robin.
so much for coming, Daniel. It's been a
Yeah,
really fascinating conversation. I'd love to do more, especially morality is great.
yeah,
Evolution is another one that I really love. But I think sort of, science is one of those things that if you start talking about it, I will go down that rabbit hole for ages because,
right.
I really do enjoy talking science.
Yeah,
But
okay.
I want to say a big thank you to the audience. Thank you for coming, listening to Daniel, hearing him out. Please be kind to everybody. He may not agree. I might find it frustrating. He might find me frustrating. That's okay. We can still be reasonable and sort of treat each other civilly, okay? Which is really what I'm after. I do not want, trash fires and yelling. So thank you, Daniel, for not yelling at me. I really appreciate it. It's fantastic. And do be kind to yourself, okay? It's pretty stressful at the moment. I get it. Be kind to yourself. Take care of yourself. Be kind to others. And I will see you in the next one. Hopefully, we can talk with Daniel again, see if we can get something lined up, and have another discussion. Thanks,
Have
everybody. Bye bye.
a good day, guys. Bye.
To what new horizons can we look now? Where are tomorrow's opportunities? frontiers of the future are not on any map. But now, what's ahead of us?